Poor Emma isn't with us today. Emma Egbert, because the other Emma is with us. That's always good. So I told her I would record today's message, and then I thought maybe I should just like have this catastrophic, breakdown, and it would just stop right in the middle, and then just freeze there for like long periods of time, and then she'd be forced to have to slide back and forth through the YouTube clip. But we won't do that to you, Emma. So if you're watching this,
Hello,
Emma.
Hi.
Yes. So with that, let's go ahead and we'll open up with a quick word of prayer, and then we'll get ourselves going with problems with the endocrine system. And really, I think we're going to kind of finish things up today. We may actually be a little bit ahead of the game. I'll let you know what's going to be on the final exam, and then approximate number of questions and that kind of thing, and just a general, things that you should be thinking about. And then on Monday, if you've got questions, we'll go over anything that you might be a little uncomfortable with or not sharp on, and take it from there. So let's pray. Gracious Lord, thanks for bringing us together today, for giving us a good day to be together. We thank and praise you for opportunities tonight to gather together for some fun and festivities, and we ask that you would be with our guys' basketball teams and bless them, Lord, as they endeavor to use their gifts and talents to your honor and glory. May we be excellent witnesses in how we conduct ourselves both on and off the court. For many of us, this is a busy weekend as we prepare for our final exams next week. Be with those who are taking exams, and bless our studies. Help us to get good rest and be properly prepared for them so that we can do well. I ask, Lord, that you would continue to be with anybody who's dealing with health issues. I thank you that things are moving in maybe some new positive directions for me, and I just ask that the surgery upcoming will be smooth and easy and in a timely fashion. Be with anybody who's not feeling well, including Emma and others who are out today. Extend your hand of grace, provide for their needs. Guide us as we go about our tasks, now and always in your keeping. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. All right, so yesterday we had just gotten to this slide on pituitary dwarfism, gigantism, and acromegaly. And I think we had touched on the ideas of not acromegaly, but both dwarfism, pituitary dwarfism, and gigantism. Now, there are other forms of dwarfism. And many times when you see, even like on the TV with the Little Johnsons or something like that, they get the little people ones, right? It's a what is it?
7 Little Johnsons.
Is it 7? Okay. Okay, on the TLC. Excellent. I just like to see a mashup of that and my 600-pound life.
600-pound Little Johnson.
And then mix that in with Animal Planet and Shark Week.
I love Shark.
See, that would be kind of fun. Yep, toss them in. That would be entertaining, right? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, those individuals have a genetic anomaly that actually causes stunted growth. It is not as related to the pituitary gland as this is. Typically, when we talk about pituitary dwarfism, the person is still proportional. The head is not misshapen. The body and arms and legs and that typically don't exhibit the webbing that we see with genetic dwarfism. This is definitely a separate category. The other that you see with that, kind of the Oompa Loompa, and I'm not saying that in a derogatory fashion, but many times individuals who are in perhaps movies and are short in stature in that regard, that's a different form of it. This is pituitary dwarfism. Some of the shortest and smallest of the individuals on the record books suffered from this. In the, Greatest Showman, Colonel Tom Thumb, working with the circus, he was definitely pituitary dwarf. And if you take a look at the body structure, it's like you have a miniature person, fully shaped and fully proportional from head to toe. That's why I like this picture, because it really shows, it highlights, how small a person can actually be. And what is it, 2 foot 5 and 3.37 inches? I mean, they're very, very tiny. So that is an undersecretion of human growth hormone. It hasn't gotten into the bloodstream like it should, and as a result, the person retains this stature. Typically, we don't have the problems of spinal deformation that we do with other forms of dwarfism, where you typically will have some type of a hunching that takes place later on. You don't have some of the other issues that typically you'll see with individuals who have more of a genetic anomaly. This could be caused by damage to the pituitary gland, so it undersecretes. It could be that area simply wasn't being properly formed during development, and as a result, the pituitary gland hyposecretes, doesn't give off enough. An individual who would be pituitary dwarf would make an excellent jockey, right? Very lightweight and still proportional. So individuals who actually are jockeys, in many cases, did have some hyposecretion of human growth hormone when they were younger, so they tend to be much shorter. When we talk about gigantism comes kind of in two forms. So the gigantism that we see when it is a hyposecretion, the person reaches a maximum height and stops growing. And typically that height is reached in puberty. So as they get to that end of puberty, we're now in adulthood, you are now in this tall state, and that's not going to change. With a person who suffers from acromegaly, we have a completely different situation. There, the brain continues to oversecrete human growth hormone, and so they never stop growing. Now, typically, at a certain point in time, with long bone growth, the ends of the bone, which are covered with hyaline cartilage, will eventually reach their maximum limit. And the layer of hyaline cartilage, although it thins as we age, it is still being maintained. But when you hypersecrete in adulthood, that cartilage continues to get converted into bone. And so although the bone continues to grow and grow and grow, the cartilage becomes thinner and thinner and thinner. And eventually you end up with situations where the person really is experiencing horrible, horrible crippling arthritis. And many times individuals who are acromegalic become bedridden because they can't move comfortably anymore. Knees lock up, elbows lock up, hands lock up. It can be really, really, really difficult and very debilitating. To some degree, we have some means of control. If there is something that is causing this because there's a tumor there that's squeezing on the gland to make it hypersecrete, sometimes we can intervene. But in general, individuals who are acromegalic, it's not going to end well for them. And they do have fairly normal life expectancies. So it's not unheard of to see individuals getting into their late 70s or 80s who are acromegalic. One of the weird things that we see, because the body continues to grow, are features that normally kind of reach a maximum, continue to get bigger and bigger. In particular, the bone growth of the jaw continues to add and broaden. And so what we end up with is this very square, very pronounced jawbone, which is sometimes referred to as having lantern jaw. And that's this thickening of the ramus of the bone, this jaw edge, and then the pronounced lip of the jaw begins to jut further and further out. You'll also see more bone being put into the brow, and so the brow becomes more pronounced. And if you take a look at the picture of this gentleman who is acromegalic, you can see the thickening of that. You can also see the thickening of the jawline. What else seems to be a little disproportionate on his face? Nose and ears. The ears continue to enlarge and the nose continues to broaden. So we definitely have a situation here where the bone growth is almost like it's uncontrolled in the long run. it is slow growth. It isn't like you wake up the next day and you're 2 inches taller than you were the day before. It's just continued growth. Women who suffer from this are going to definitely have difficulties, even with reproduction. They can get to be very, very tall and very, very, very big boned. And when you're carrying weight in other ways, it can be very, very challenging. That deformity of the face also creates more of a masculinization of the features. So it is something that, I've seen individuals who were rather beautiful in their younger years who suffer from acromegaly, and as they age, they become far more emasculated, and it isn't a pleasant situation. With men, I think sometimes you almost take on the Herman Munster look, and maybe it isn't quite as difficult. But whatever the case is, it is a situation that if it is a problem with the pituitary gland, there are some treatments that we can go in and do from a brain surgery point of view to help reduce that. Today we have a little bit more control over it than we used to. This individual that's in the picture here, Sultan Kozan, 8'1", he is an individual who hypersecreted. It's regular gigantism. He's not actually acromegalic. Many times when you see acromegalics at like his age and at that height, they are either in crutches or they are in wheelchairs because their joints have become so deformed or damaged. Okay. Questions? If this stuff is intriguing to you, there's tons of stuff out on the net. I would really recommend going ahead and spending some time reading about it. When I was a kid, I was fascinated by these kinds of anomalies. And when you read some of the stuff that was written about people who lived in the circus, you'll typically see individuals who were on this spectrum in there. Because what could you do for a living? When you're very, 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 very short. I mean, people don't realize how much of a disability that can be. I mean, think about just being able to drive a car. Think about being 8 foot tall and going through doorways that are typically 7 foot in height. What do you have to do? You always have to duck. And most homes have an 8 foot or 9 foot ceiling. So individuals who are acromegalic or who are suffering from gigantism have to have raised ceilings. It even determines where you can live. I've often wondered about this, and I've never asked the question of somebody who suffers from it because I really have never had the opportunity, but can you imagine using a toilet when you're 8 foot tall? How many of you agree? Whoa, never thought about that, right? Just being able to get in and out of a car. That's a challenge. So, I don't know, it'd be very interesting sometime to interview and talk with somebody who's dealt with this kind of a problem. And I would imagine with some of the professional basketball players, if you're making the kind of money you should be making in that kind of environment, buying a larger car with, maybe a customized seat is more akin to the possibilities. But you think about guys like Magic Johnson and others, and you sometimes wonder, wouldn't that Shaq? There's no way he drives a regular car, right? I mean, just look at this. I mean, and he's got some bulk to him too. So I don't know. Go figure. All right, let's keep going. All right, so now we're going to deal with diabetes. This is the other major one. When we talk about diabetes, diabetes comes in 3 basic kinds. And the first one is totally unrelated to the other 2. Okay? So when we talk about diabetes insipidus is an extremely rare condition. It is not the same as type 1 and type 2 diabetes mellitus. Okay? Ooh, that's on the slide, but it's not on our printout. Correct. So you may want to add that. Diabetes insipidus is a hyposecretion of ADH. In other words, you are not telling your kidneys To do what? What does ADH do? You got to know this, folks. This is going to be on your final exam, I can guarantee you. What does ADH do? Tells the kidneys to retain water. Okay? Don't pee, retain water. All right. If you hyposecrete that, what are you going to be doing? Urinating very frequently. Okay? This is why this is a problem. It continues to drain the body of fluids. So you run the problem and run the risk of not only dehydration, but because you are also flushing from your body so much in terms of water, you also lose sugar. You literally are running low on the things that you need to have in your body. And so there is a lack of sugar control due to a malfunctioning of urinary output. So one of the symptoms of this is that people who have diabetes insipidus are thirsty all the time. And even though they drink large amounts of water, they don't seem to ever really be able to quench their thirst. And that's one of those things that, on the scale you used to see, you'd know something was wrong with the person. Okay? Now, for diabetes mellitus type 1 and type 2, now we're talking about a problem with the pancreas. So whereas diabetes insipidus is really a problem that's a combination of the gland that secretes ADH as well as the kidneys, this is really only about the pancreas and the pancreas's inability to produce insulin. Now, in diabetes mellitus type 1, which is called juvenile diabetes, we're talking about an inability to secrete insulin or a hyposecretion of insulin. So you may want to add that on here. You might not be able to make it at all. Might not even be able to make it at all. Why do we call it juvenile diabetes? Because it is oftentimes diagnosed in childhood. This is a genetic condition that you're born with. And it requires you to monitor your blood sugar, and it requires you to do insulin injections. Because you don't make insulin, you can't just take an oral dose of something to kick your pancreas into action. Your pancreas simply doesn't make the insulin that's necessary. Now, what happens if this is not properly diagnosed or treated, or if it is diagnosed but you don't treat it properly? One of the problems that can arise, and it doesn't happen as frequently with diabetes mellitus type 2 as it does with diabetes type 1. It's something called ketoacidosis. Ketoacidosis occurs when the body requires something to burn for energy, and glucose isn't being made properly available. And so the body goes to its fat reserves, and it burns those fat reserves. Now, there's some advantage to burning fat. You get a lot of energy out of it. But there's also a byproduct, and that byproduct is a chemical called a ketone. Ketones, when they build up in the blood, turn the blood more acidic. Hence, the condition keto, burned off fat, byproducts. Acid, the blood is beginning to change in pH. Osis, we got a problem. Ketoacidosis can lead to diabetic coma and collapse and death. In fact, one of the signs of ketoacidosis is the breath smells like you've either been drinking wine or it smells almost fruity when it shouldn't. So an individual who suffers from diabetes mellitus type 1, who suddenly appears almost like they're drunk, which shouldn't happen because a person who is diabetic shouldn't be doing what? Drinking alcohol, because that's highly dangerous. It introduces a tremendous amount of sugar into the system, and it makes the body do a lot more work to try and detoxify, which is why it's important not to imbibe a lot of alcohol. In fact, it's probably best to be minimally taking in alcohol if you're actually a diabetic. But you may begin to experience some of the symptoms of being inebriated. There is typically some confusion that goes hand in hand with this. And the best way to find out whether or not you are stepping into this ketoacidosis stage is to quickly test urine for ketones, because the body is trying to process that chemical out of the system and it's now in the bloodstream. And the other thing to do is to test the blood sugar. And if the blood sugar is exceptionally high, there's a problem obviously with the insulin. The sugar that is available isn't being uptaken by the cells. So this is the conflicting problem that you're dealing with. Now, most of the time, if you're monitoring your blood sugar and you're getting proper diet and exercise, diabetes mellitus type 1 is something that you can live with and have a normal life expectancy. Are there some difficulties with it? Absolutely. And you do have to be aware that later on in life, there are going to be challenges. What are some of the challenges that people with diabetes oftentimes face later on in life? Much higher rate of having something amputated. Anybody know what? Feet. How come? We're in your class to learn something, so tell us. Okay. When we're dealing with diabetes, mellitus type 1 and type 2, individuals in their elder years begin to have some difficulties with neuropathy. Nerves are no longer as sensitive. They may actually literally shut down in the bottoms and sides of the feet. Because of this, you don't notice small injuries. And it's very easy for small injuries, like an ingrown toenail or a cut or a scrape or a split, to become infected. Typically, as you get older, you are less able to take care of your feet because you have difficulties getting to them. And if that's the case, it's very easy for a small wound to become an ulcer or an infection that can lead to gangrene. And then you're talking about having to have amputation take place. The skin changes on the feet as well. It tends to become more dry, more flaky, and it compresses more easily, so the formation of calluses can occur. And the number one place for pressure sores to build up is on the ball of the foot and on the pad of the big toe. So individuals who are diabetic need to be particularly aware of their feet and take exceptional care of their feet. One of the big things that they always say is to if you can't have your feet taken care of by yourself, you need to have somebody else who's able to help you with that. So getting a pedicure isn't necessarily a bad thing for grandma to go do if grandma's been dealing with this for a while. We had a relative, my grandmother-in-law, my wife's grandmother, had suffered from diabetes type 2 for many, many years. And she had problems with circulation in her feet and lower legs. And she got a cut that would not heal. And it was because of poor circulation. And she didn't take care of it the way that she needed to. And it got to the point where they were actually thinking of doing amputation. She went to a wound specialist who was able to provide her with some relief. She eventually had some other complications with Parkinson's and dementia that she died before they would have had to amputate. So, all springing from this kind of an issue. All right? Questions? Okay. Is there a cure? No cure. Except to do a pancreatic transplant, in which case now you have a functional pancreas and you don't have diabetes anymore. Which I know somebody who went through one. Needed a kidney transplant, and they removed kidney from a donor and put it in, and that person had been in a car accident, so they also were harvesting other organs. because he was a relatively young recipient, they gave him a pancreas as well. So he got a new kidney, a new pancreas, and went from having childhood diabetes, having always measured and monitored his blood sugar, to perfectly normal. It was the weirdest thing. And I remember talking with him afterwards, and he said it was just crazy to not have to go through the finger pricking and all of that. Just cool. All right, let's keep going. Last one. Diabetes mellitus type 2. Diabetes mellitus type 2 is age onset. So this can kick in your 20s or 30s, or it can kick in your 40s, 50s, 60s. My father was diagnosed with diabetes mellitus type 2 when he was in his mid-60s. Actually, early 60s. Right around 61, 62. He was putting on an awful lot of weight, wasn't managing his diet, wasn't managing his exercise levels, and because he bulked up, there were some serious problems that were already in the works and building up. So for him, it was a matter of he needed to do blood monitoring by that time. He had some other issues that were medically complicating, but I think if he would have managed his diabetes better, things would have been a lot better for him. He should have been doing blood monitoring on a regular basis, and he was on oral meds. And sometimes oral meds can be given. Those medications affect the pancreas and tell the pancreas, hey, you're not doing enough. You need to do more. So in some cases, we can jumpstart the pancreas to get it to secrete the amounts of insulin it should. If that doesn't work, then blood sugar monitoring and insulin therapy becomes the regular regime, or regimen. You're going to have to now measure how much your glucose levels are and inject insulin when your blood sugar levels get to be at the right level. I've got a good friend who was diagnosed with this. He made some very key decisions in terms of his life activities. Dropped about close to 70 pounds. Got into a more healthy eating pattern. He's done a lot more exercising. And although it didn't go away, the amount of medicine that he has to take has been decreased. Which for many individuals, if you can manage your weight, it doesn't necessarily mean that it goes away, but it does mean that you can take less medicine, which is huge. For him, originally, he actually did have to do insulin injections. Once he got his weight under control and his blood sugar levels started to normalize, the doctor said, okay, we can take you off having to do insulin injections, and we're going to put you onto an oral med that will help to regulate your blood sugar levels by increasing pancreatic function. So he was very fortunate. He has to watch his diet. He also has to be very acutely aware, because he isn't doing a lot of blood monitoring now. He has to be very acutely aware of any changes. If he's feeling lightheaded or if he's feeling drowsy and it's an odd time during the day, he does have a blood kit with him. And those are times when he needs to do a quick check, because he could be too high or he could be too low. Many times the symptoms of either being too high or too low in your sugar are almost identical. That's why it's so critical to have a blood test to be able to do. When I was a younger guy and living down in Illinois with my wife, we were in an upstairs apartment, and our landlady, who had diabetes, and she had juvenile diabetes, diabetes mellitus type 1. I remember coming home after school one day, and the door to her lower flat was wide open, and she was just sitting. Did I tell you this story? Have I already told you this one? Yes, no?
No.
Don't remember it? She was sitting on the couch in the living room, and she saw me and she said, "Good morning." And it's like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm like, "This is Andrew, you doing okay?" "Yeah, it's been kind of a weird day." I woke up and it was so sunny this morning. I'm like, we got a problem, don't we? So I went on in and I said, when was the last time you ate? I don't think I made myself breakfast. I said, when was the last time you took your blood sugar? When I got up this morning, just a few minutes ago. This is 5 o'clock on. Let's go take a quick check on the blood sugar. Luckily, she had gotten so into a pattern of taking her blood sugar and writing it down. I knew when she had taken it and I knew what her blood sugar level was. And we did a quick check and she was very low on blood sugar. She was also a smart woman. She had an emergency list of phone numbers right next to her phone. So I was able to get a hold of her doctor. And the doctor was very thankful that somebody was there. He said she needs to eat a big breakfast right now. So make her eggs, toast, juice, jam, the whole bit. Bacon, the whole 9 yards. And give her a glass of orange juice and put 2 tablespoons of sugar in it. Stir that up and have her drink it right now. So she got, the super dose of sugar. Or can you imagine adding that much sugar to orange juice? Woo! Yeah, it'd juice you for the rest of the day. So she drank that on down, and it was amazing how she went from being almost kind of loopy, spacey, almost like she was drunk, to suddenly wide awake and aware of what was going on. And that was when the fear actually kicked in, and she was like, oh, how low is my blood sugar? So I told her, and I was already making breakfast for her. So we got food out on the table, and she ate a very healthy breakfast, and she did a blood sugar test right afterwards, and you could see her numbers were coming up. And we did a couple more tests before she was ready to, be left alone. But it was one of those where she had dosed before she went to bed, but she had not taken a midnight snack. She was always supposed to have a little bit of food when she took her evening dose of insulin to balance, and she had skipped. She dosed with her insulin, and it dropped her sugar level too low. That happened twice in the time that we were living there, which was about 6 years that we were there. So it was frightening to see how much of a difference having the right sugar levels can make. So if it's managed properly, you can live with these conditions, and you have a life expectancy that's fairly normal. Travel back to the early 1900s, and that was definitely not the case. In the early 1900s, if you were diagnosed with diabetes, it was also sometimes referred to as sugar fever, you were going to die. And there wasn't much anybody could do about it. Children, very, very complicated problems. A lot of damage to eyes and kidneys early on. Oftentimes children died of complications of it rather than the disease itself. I had a very good friend whose wife was diagnosed with it in their 30s. She didn't get it under control quickly enough, and she died. In fact, it was kind of a sad situation. He had taken their 2 children out to go to see Santa Claus. She was feeling a little under the weather, and she wanted to get some things done around the house. It was Christmas time. So he was going to take them to see Santa, get their pictures, and do a little Christmas shopping for Mom. And she laid down on the couch to take a nap. And while they were gone, she slipped into a diabetic coma and died. He came home to wake her up, and she had passed away. Unbelievable. But it was, not under management. And that's why it's so critical to learn what's going on in the body and be able to get that under control as quickly as possible. So what kinds of damage can happen in the body because of diabetes? Well, obviously we talked a little bit about nerve damage to the feet, but nerves can also be damaged in the back of the eye, the retina. And I know that's not on the slide, but you can put it on in your notes. Individuals who are at risk for this, or if they have been diagnosed with diabetes mellitus type 2, will oftentimes go through a whole battery of tests. And one of them is to look at the eye and see if there is any damage to the retina. I had a friend who was in Illinois with diabetes mellitus type 1 who didn't really monitor her blood sugar the way she needed to. She drank rather profusely. She was one that would very easily go out with friends to the bar and drink, and then she'd quickly, at the end of a drinking spree, she'd dose up with insulin to try and bring her blood sugar back into norm. She woke up one morning and couldn't see out of one of her eyes. That was her wake-up call. And she had had a blood vessel rupture and bleed, and it was an uncontrolled bleed. Made it to the hospital. They did a laser treatment, and for her, she was very fortunate. Her body was able to clear the blood from the fluid of the eye, and she ended up getting her sight back. That was the wake-up call she needed, and she went to being very, very regimented in monitoring her blood sugar levels and eating a more balanced diet and leading a much healthier lifestyle and cutting out things like alcohol, big time. Another thing that can be damaged by this are the kidneys, and so they will test for kidney function and make sure that there's no kidney damage. Because the kidneys have to flush out more substances because the body isn't balancing correctly. Damage to the nephrons can be detected. And so if we see those kinds of problems, those have to be dealt with. All right? Now, there are typically 3 signs of diabetes mellitus. Polyuria, polydipsia, and polyphagia. Poly means many. So polyuria, many times going to the bathroom. You're peeing. Why? Because the body is processing and trying to flush fluids out. And oftentimes it's to try and counteract either the ketones or it's trying to counteract the sugar. Polydipsia is excessive thirst. You've got to drink. You feel like you're thirsty all the time. My good friend who used to work here was the individual who got the kidney and pancreas transplant. Back before it was fashionable to have your water bottles with you, he had water bottles with him all the time. He was always drinking water. And then polyphagia is an excessive hunger. Many times individuals who have diabetes mellitus type 1 might eat a lot, but they don't seem to be retaining much in terms of weight because their body seems to burn it off. And that's partly because of the body processing fats in a different way. And in those situations, you can really end up with difficulties. If diabetes is managed, these cardinal signs, these things that we normally would see, lower in their severity. And so you might not see those things as frequently. Right? Where are we at?
Yeah.
That's it. Okay? So, what's going to be included on your final exam? Chapter 1, which is A&P intro. Chapters 2 and 3, which is everything from cells and organelles and macromolecules to tissues. Right? And then you got chapter 4, integumentary system, which is what we just finished. And then chapter 9, endocrine system. Okay? So those are the beasts that'll be on there. Questions will come from prior tests. The only section that you don't have a prior test to study off of, obviously, is the endocrine system. And what I may end up doing on Monday is allowing you a chance to see some of the questions from that test so that we can kind of go over a little bit of that and do some practice with it. That's kind of how I'd like to finish up the rest of our time together. And then you would be stepping into your exam on the day that our exam is. And which day is that one? Wednesday. Is that the Wednesday? It's the first day? No, second day. Is that the killer day? Yeah. What else do you have that day? Oh, you're kidding me. Oh, Mr. Holzheimer, what did you do? Ouch. You have a light day on Thursday?
I have study hall and choir.
Study hall and choir. So do you even have to show up? So you're set for that day, which is nice. Student council still running the Christmas dinner? Yes, got the big Christmas dinner coming up. So that should be fun. Are they doing it in the gym again?
I believe so.
Okay. Awesome. There will be no essays. No essays. All you have got is multiple choice, true, false, matching. The only other thing that I'll have is I've got a couple of diagrams. One diagram is going to have like 5 pictures of the human body systems, and you'll need to know which ones they are. One is going to be those macromolecule diagrams, where you'll have to tell me, is that a nucleotide? Is that a fat? Boom.
Is it
Yep.
something on
Yep,
Scantron?
and it'll be matching. All of it's going to be Scantron. And right now, I think we are at right around the 150, 160 mark.
100 last test.
Yeah. So, yeah. And there is a big chunk of it is actually the Chapter 9 test.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you'll see a breakdown on that on Monday. Okay.